So we started the day talking about how to talk to your church about immigration and how to use the tools that have been created, these learning guides and other things, books that are out there. Then we moved on to, okay, now we want to engage. We've decided, this is an important issue to us. How do we engage in a healthy way? Now we're moving to a more practical part of this day, and we're going to be talking about, you've decided you want to help with the immigration legal issues. So you've picked your ministry and you want to get involved in the legal area, but you're not sure that you want to actually open a legal clinic. So maybe you're exploring that, or you've even decided that's not what you want to do, but you still want to know how can you help with legal issues without opening an actual legal program. So we're going to talk about a few key things in this presentation. The first is unauthorized practice of law and its consequences. The second is understanding the complexities of immigration law and the importance of accurate information and referrals, document collection and helping to prepare for immigration reform, and then how to give support for those affected by detention or removal, citizenship and English class opportunities, and then we're going to end the day with a little discussion about liability concerns that churches have. So who can give immigration legal advice? The only people that can give legal advice are immigration attorneys and Board of Immigration Appeals accredited representatives who work for a nonprofit that's recognized by the same board, or paralegals working under the supervision of an attorney or BIA accredited representative. So what are the consequences of unauthorized practice of law? States define unauthorized practice of law and what that means, but most states agree that it's anything beyond just a simple translation of a form or filling in verbatim what an individual would say to you. My name is, Rita Smith, and you write Rita Smith, and there's no interpretation. There's no application of their set of facts to the law. That's where you get into trouble with legal advice. And there are civil and criminal consequences for unauthorized practice of law. But the biggest consequence is the result to the person that you're advising. So World Relief runs a hotline that church denominations can distribute out to their churches to call and get help with immigration issues. And I had a guy call me, year after year, and he was doing religious worker applications for people in the church, and he was not accredited, and he was not an attorney. And I kept saying, please stop doing this. Let's get you accredited. We can help you. And I had this conversation with him a lot of different times. And one day he called because he had made a simple error. And now this couple had been in the United States. They had been on a religious worker visa. They were fine. They had no unauthorized stay. They had no issues. And he missed a date he didn't understand, and now they were undocumented, and there was nothing that could be done for them. And so they are facing this, elderly couple in the United States are facing this issue that if they leave the country, they're barred from reentering for 10 years. They have no solution while they're here, and this man is living with the guilt that he gave them that advice. So those are the real consequences, beyond just being sued or facing liability or facing criminal charges. That's the real consequence. And I think that there hasn't been a lot of support for pastors within denoms a lot of times, especially language churches and Hispanic pastors have not had support. And so a lot of them have taken this on because it's such a big need. So it's not out of malice, it's out of a heart of service and love for people, but it can have terrible consequences. So, and it can make the church and the denomination liable. Somebody could sue the church, the denomination, as a result. So, okay. So, along those lines, we need to also understand the complexities of immigration law. So I want to give you guys 3 different scenarios. Okay, 3 undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens. So far, all 3 of them are undocumented. They're all married to U.S. citizens. So far, the facts seem the same. The first spouse, his parents brought him across the border as an infant. They came secretly across the border without permission. He's never left the United States. The second spouse, the parents brought him across the border as an infant. He never left. But in 1999, a church filed an employment visa application for him that was denied. And the third spouse, parents and infant son, came into the US on tourist visas, then the family never left the United States. Okay? 3 different results. The first spouse, probably not eligible to apply for a green card through his US citizen wife. The second spouse is likely eligible to pay a $1,000 fine and apply for a green card through his US citizen wife. And the third spouse, his undocumented status is forgiven because he is married to a US citizen, and he will likely be able to apply for a green card through his US citizen wife. So a simple fact, how you cross the border. Did you come on a tourist visa, or did you come across with permission and then overstay? Did you come across secretly? Was there some sort of set of circumstances that interrupted, like an application that was denied by a certain date, or are you from a particular country? Just a simple fact can completely change the outcome of some of these situations. So if a church has been helping people and they don't have permission to help, and they don't have training, and they've always been dealing with people that kind of fell in this category, they get very comfortable helping people in that category. And then you sort of get overconfident and you think, well, I know what to do in this situation, spouse of a US citizen. Okay, we fill out these forms. But you can see that you need to really understand the law and all of the facts that can throw things off. So it's very fact-based. One thing can just completely change it. So the hurdles that immigrants face trying to gain status in the United States. There's 6 hurdles. And this should just give you a framework of immigration law and how it works. The first hurdle is you have to qualify for an immigration benefit. There are hundreds of immigration benefits, but you have to qualify for one of them. You have to meet the requirement. The second is you have to be able to overcome grounds of inadmissibility. The government set up a list of rules. These are the people we don't want here. So even after you qualify for a benefit, you might fall under one of those grounds. The third is financial issues. The fourth is the process itself. Where do you file the application? Did you get the letter from immigration that came in the mail? Just the process. The fifth is inspection and admission. Maybe you get the visa overseas, you travel to the US border, but you have to still be admitted at the border. And the sixth hurdle is just staying in status once you're here and following the rules and making sure you understand the rules of your particular status. So we're going to talk real briefly about each one. So the first hurdle, qualifying for an immigration benefit. Like I said before, there's hundreds of benefits and they have unique requirements. And each requirement has a set of unique exceptions. So it's very complex. The most common ways that people enter the United States are through either a non-immigrant visa or an immigrant visa. A non-immigrant visa allows you to come in temporarily, like a tourist or a student, or a temporary worker like a pastor on an R1 visa. An immigrant visa, that leads to a green card and potentially, eventually, citizenship. And the most common ways individuals enter on immigrant visas are through family member relationships, through an employer, although coming in as an unskilled laborer is difficult, through the diversity visa lottery, or as a refugee or an asylee. So these hundreds of benefits, most of them fall within these broad categories. The second hurdle, grounds of inadmissibility. So I'm a pastor. I figured out that I qualify for a religious worker visa, an R1 visa, temporary. I can come in for 5 years and work here for a church. But previously, I had overstayed some other visa in my past, and so then I would fall underneath these grounds of inadmissibility. So even though I meet the requirements for that particular benefit, then I have to go and look at this list. And this list is much more extensive than what I have on the screen. But certain crimes, your financial status, violation of immigration laws in the past, all of those things can prevent you from coming in. Certain associations with different political groups can prevent you. Sometimes you qualify for a waiver or an exception, but often that's tied to a particular immigration benefit. So as a religious worker on an R1 visa, there are no exceptions or waivers for me under that particular visa category. So I would get tripped up on hurdle number 2, and I'd have to go back to the start of the race. Hurdle 3 and 4 finances and process. So we all know it costs a lot. There's visa processing fees, application fees, attorney costs, travel expenses, and then some benefits themselves have their own financial requirements. If you want to come as a student, you have to demonstrate that you can pay for school. If you can't pay tuition, you can't get a student visa. So then you trip over hurdle number 3, and you have to go back to the very beginning of the line. And then the process itself. The amount of evidence required. I used to say when I'd file a religious worker application, sometimes my packets weighed 6 pounds. It's a lot of evidence that's required. And technology hasn't really caught up. A lot of it's actual paper you have to put into an envelope and send in. They don't always see it, even though you send it in. So then they send a request for evidence, and they ask for the same thing over again, or for something else. And just the process itself, people can get hung up there and stuck there, and they trip over that hurdle, and they can't get beyond that. The 5th hurdle, the 5th and 6th hurdles are admission and then staying in status. So let's say I got a tourist visa. Okay, a tourist visa says you can come into the United States and visit temporarily for tourist purposes. Visit family, see the Eiffel, we don't have the Eiffel Tower here. See the Empire State Building, whatever. That would probably cause some suspicion on your application. Okay, so you want to come in and just visit, and I get to the border, and then the officer says, "Can I look in your bag?" And I say, "Sure." And he pulls out a letter from my sister, and she says, "Oh, I can't wait to connect you with my friend Bob. He's got a job for you when you get here." And the officer says, "You don't really intend to come here on a tourist visa. You intend to work. Sorry, you can't come into the United States. I'm automatically on a plane back, no hearing, that's the end of it." Okay, so even if you get the visa, you don't fall within the grounds of inadmissibility, you have the money, you get through the process, you get to the border, that still doesn't guarantee that you're actually going to get into the United States. And then staying in status. Every benefit has rules that you have to follow. If I'm a religious worker on an R1 visa, I can only stay at the church that hired me. I can't change churches without going through a whole new process. But a lot of times people don't understand that, and they change. And they switch and go to a different church, and now they've fallen out of status. So you have to understand the requirements of the particular benefit, and then stay away from these grounds of deportability. So the government made a list of people we don't want to let in. They also made a list of the people we want to kick out. So you got to make sure that you don't do anything on that list. Certain crimes, there's a whole long list of things. So you see how complex it is, and all the different places where people can get tripped up. So it's really important that people have accurate information and access to quality legal advice. So when thinking about what you can do in the meantime, when you're exploring it, whether you want to open up a clinic or while you're waiting for your accreditation to come through, one way the church can help is to develop a well-researched referral list. And churches are uniquely placed in communities where they're places of trust. This morning, Norm, sorry, I lost his name, was talking about the weight of being undocumented and that this man committed suicide. And I think about the church as this place of trust where people can release their burdens. And they can come to you and they can tell you the truth, and they may not feel like they can tell anybody else the truth about their situation. So churches are uniquely placed to receive that information, to be a place of relief just in telling the story. I think churches get really frustrated because all these people are coming to us and we can't help them because they don't have the tools to actually solve their immigration situation. But just being able to release that secret and to be able to know that that individual knowing they don't have immigration options is actually a huge help and benefit to them because they won't be vulnerable to being taken advantage of by people in the community who offer them services they're not eligible for and charge them a whole lot of money for that. So there are ways that churches can help with connecting people to good information and good practitioners. There's a challenge there, though. Churches have to get into their communities and get to know their communities to really know who's legitimate. It's one thing to get a list off the internet of all the attorneys that are there or all the nonprofits that exist, but you actually have to go and investigate. As Mary shared when we were at James Place, you have to make sure that an attorney who says they do immigration really knows what they're talking about. So it requires effort. So one way to help is to become sort of guides or advocates, where maybe you don't open a clinic, but you go with people to their appointments, and you research quality practitioners, and you help with translation, and you help with document collection. So you go to the practitioner, the BIA accredited rep or the attorney, and they give the legal advice. Then you go and help this person in your church actually get all the things they need to put their application together. That's something you can do. That's not an authorized practice of law, because you're not applying the law to their facts. You're just helping gather what the attorney asked or the BIA rep asked for. The other thing you can do is host an informational or group processing workshop in partnership with local nonprofits or attorneys. I know that Jason, before they got started, they hosted some of these deferred action workshops, these DACA workshops, to tell people about the new law. So they work together with with Mary and others to put those on. But that's something that a church can do. The other thing is preparing for immigration reform. So there's things that people can be doing right now, even though we don't actually have reform, to get ready if it's passed. Identity documents, documents to prove physical presence in the United States, documents related to criminal history, and their immigration history. Especially documents related to criminal history, those are sometimes difficult to get, so that's something that church volunteers could help individuals gather all of these documents. So as soon as a law is passed and the regulations are out, then they're already prepared to go ahead and apply. Another way churches can get involved is support for those affected by detention and removal. So we often encourage churches to help people develop a family safety packet, a plan. What do you do if you get stopped by the police? What do you do if you get detained? What are you going to do if you get removed? If you have children, you don't want them to end up in the foster care system. You need a plan. You need to know who's picking the kids up from school, who has power of attorney, all of these things that are terrifying to think about, but I think developing a plan, I think it helps take at least a little bit of the fear out of it, that there's a plan, that they know what they're going to do in case that happens. Another thing, churches are well networked, usually within denominations or connected to larger networks. And so there's the network that exists here in the US, but there's also the network overseas. And so it's also, if I get removed, I'll likely be removed to such and such a country. Maybe let's put $500 in a bank account there, and let's figure out who I would contact if I was there, and where I might work and what I might do, and just develop a plan. What are we going to do just in case that were to happen? So a family safety plan has the actual written plan, biographical information, contact lists of important people, like an attorney, other important documents, bank statements, things like that. And then another way a church can get involved is to get involved in informational workshops on what to do if you're stopped by the police, like know your rights. Do you have to sign anything? What do you have to say or not say in those set of circumstances? What is the process? So something we're working on in this church leader's guide is what happens when somebody gets detained? What's the process? What do they have? What are their rights? What do they have access to? And just an individual knowing, I should get a bond hearing. I may be able to get out. That information is really powerful in that circumstance, that they can ask for that. So you can help with training on that, provide support to families who are separated, or visit and advocate for detainees. Get inside the detention centers. Pastors sometimes have a little bit easier time getting in because of their credentials. Go in and do ministry and really see the conditions and really be able to advocate for people who are in that situation. And then citizenship in English. So we're thinking that probably the immigration reform will have some sort of English or civics component. And so churches can start by helping people with civics and English preparation for either reform or related to citizenship. One challenge churches have that want to get accreditation is they don't know who within their congregation speaks English well enough to communicate with USCIS. This is some frustrations that I've been hearing from some immigrant churches. They're concerned about that. So maybe an English class that's really focused on, immigration law and terms and phrases around that might be something that'd be really helpful for a church to provide, especially if there's pro bono attorneys in the church congregation who'd be willing to do that. And then just general English classes is another way. So some of the liability concerns. Just one thing to note, that being inside the United States without valid immigration status, it's a civil violation. It's not a criminal, it's not a crime. Crossing the US border without permission is a misdemeanor. But simply being here without status is not a crime. Churches are able to provide charitable services for undocumented immigrants. There's nothing in the Immigration and Nationality Act that says that you cannot minister to undocumented immigrants, that you can't ordain them or credential them. The only limitation right now is that you cannot hire somebody who doesn't have permission to work. So this is tricky because it doesn't just apply to undocumented immigrants. Students on student visas have very limited employment opportunities, so you can't usually hire someone on a student visa either, or a tourist can't work while they're here. So this applies, they have to have permission to work while they're here. It's, again, following those, knowing what the rules are of your particular benefit and then following those. You have to know if you have permission to work or not and how to hire them.